Well, here we are once again. The special guest today. Evening and welcome once again, or perhaps afternoon, to Gaming Under the Influence. Mike, and I'm here with Alex and with our special old friend Raph, who's here to share his expertise on whiskey with us today. Usually you'll find us drinking a beer and blabbing a little bit about it, but...
changing things up for 2020 a little bit.
Looks like on the 18th of this month, we're going to be hosting a whiskey tasting here. The same gentleman who's here to speak with us today. So, as a preface to that, please enjoy while we learn a little bit about fine Ontario whiskey.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds good.
How are you today, Raph?
Not bad, guys. Not bad.
Yeah.
How are you?
Oh, not so bad. And
Doing okay.
First drink of the day. It's never a bad thing.
Yeah.
First podcast of the year.
Yeah.
I feel like we haven't recorded in like a month.
Yeah, feels like it's been a while.
Yeah.
Last year already feels like a distant memory.
I know, right?
Very
It's the long hangover from the holidays.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
I sort of feel that way. Just
Life
been
is
like
just one giant
coasting and
hangover
Yeah.
Age does that to you, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, firstly, what are we drinking here today, buddy?
So we're tasting one of the whiskeys that we're going to also be sampling during the whiskey tasting.
Yeah.
This one?
Not that
one's next.
Not that one?
Yeah.
Oh, this one's
so
next. I'm an idiot.
Right now we're tasting some 40 Creek. And it's pretty good whiskey all around. It's a style that's very palatable to most people, even if they're not whiskey drinkers.
And what kind of style is this?
So this would be a sweet forward sort of traditional Canadian whiskey
Okay.
that uses multiple types of grains
I see.
that are then blended together.
And that's where the sweetness comes from, or?
Sweetness comes from different factors. So you can get sweetness from the barrel. You can also get sweetness from the distillate itself. Yeah, from the
Very
different
nice.
grains.
And this one doesn't look particularly oily. Is there any significance to that?
Usually, when you see oiliness in a whiskey, it's a sign that it hasn't been chill filtered, which is actually preferable to chill filtered whiskey, in my opinion. The old chill filtered style came from the fact that people used to throw ice in their whiskey all the time, and if you don't chill filter a whiskey, it will cloud up when you throw ice in it.
Really?
But by chill filtering a whiskey, you actually remove oils and esters that contribute to both mouthfeel and flavor.
Mm-hmm.
So preferably don't chill filter your whiskey
Very cool, man.
if you're a producer.
Now, it'd be great if you could tell us a little bit about the history of all of these whiskey terms that we just were exposed to. But before that, I asked you this in the past couple of days. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about it. Like, I read that it's not great to put ice in your whiskey, especially not in good whiskey.
Yeah,
Especially not in single malt whiskey.
I'm pretentious when it comes to this. I don't think ice belongs anywhere near whiskey.
Is it not, though, a matter of scientific fact that...
Yes, so it's absolutely the case. If you lower the temperature of any distillate whatsoever, you reduce your palate's ability to pick it up. You're actually muting the whiskey, and if you chill a whiskey down to a certain level, you won't get any aromas off of it at all. So if you're doing a formal tasting, or even if you like higher end whiskeys and you're spending that $200, $300, $400 a bottle, the last thing you should be doing is pouring it over ice.
So you're saying unless you're just simply trying to get her into you, you don't want to put ice.
There's people that will say, and there's something to be said about this. It is a luxury, so consume your luxuries the way you wish.
No, fair enough. Touche.
Yeah.
But,
that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
If there's room for that. Like, if somebody prefers it that way.
No. If you prefer drinking your whiskey with ice in it, I'm not going to stop you. But I'll tell you right now,
but you like the full experience. You want
it's like playing Dark Souls on easy mode.
Yeah, sure.
Disservice.
Sure.
Or respect to the artistic form, you know?
Fallout with not on survival mode.
Sure.
It's something that you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah,
especially if you really want to get into the spirit, and it's a very, very complex spirit.
I think this though touches on something we talk a lot about on this show, in the sense that just like when you're making a painting, like the whiskey maker probably, if he knows his craft well, has something in mind when he sets out to, his palate is his ingredients, and he has something in mind to achieve. And supposing you go in with the intent to, experience his conception, you can't really accomplish that if
there's no ice anywhere
watering
before.
It down, literally.
There's no ice anywhere before, during, or after the production of whiskey. So the only time ice would get in it is when you're drinking it.
So what was that the term you used earlier when you said cold chilled?
So chill filtration is a process. So that's a process of dropping the whiskey down to a very low temperature and then putting it through a filter.
Okay. So just part of the process doesn't affect
It's
how
a
does it affect the
specific
end product,
process
I
which is
guess?
done to some whiskeys
Right.
and not to others. So a lot of high production whiskey, your Johnny Walkers, your Canadian Clubs, your Jack Daniels,
Yeah.
they'll be chill filtered.
Okay.
And what that does is it basically makes the whiskey look cleaner in the glass when you add ice.
Because
That's
they
the
know
only-
it's. But like, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, they do this to crappy whiskeys. You're saying then, or like mass-produced whiskeys because they know
sometimes-
people will ice it, or
Yeah, there's a lot of big distilleries that just do this because it's an old sort of mindset. It certainly isn't traditional to whiskey. For the
No.
majority of the lifetime of whiskey was not chill filtered. It's a fairly modern process.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been done, especially during the whole decline of the drinks culture, with American Prohibition, all the way up until the 70s, when you had a terrible alcohol culture throughout the West. People were just chill filtering because everything was about appearance.
yeah.
So
Okay.
people drank whiskey because when they threw it in ice and mixed it with Coke, if it turned cloudy, people would be like, "Oh, there's something wrong
What
with
are you
this."
drinking? Yeah.
They were also drinking garbage like banana daiquiris every day,
Yeah.
and bar lime and all these other poisonous things that are
Yeah,
not good for
sure.
you. So,
No real drinks.
yeah, a craft distillery should not, in my humble opinion, chill filter their product. They should take it out of the barrel and they should put it in a bottle, and that's how you should be consuming it.
I see.
That is what we call an integrity bottling.
So at least we can rest content with the fact that if you do add ice or chill filter your whiskey, you're losing something of its character.
Absolutely the case. Yeah.
Shit.
So the one we just drank, that wasn't cold filter, or was?
Unless it states
Or
it
you don't know.
specifically on
Okay.
the label,
Fuck.
I assume everything is chill filtered.
Oh, okay.
Now, maybe the folks at 40 Creek can let us know if they chill filter their whiskey or not.
Mhm.
I wouldn't have a problem with that whatsoever.
Fucking break their balls on Twitter. You might get an answer.
Yeah.
Fair
yeah.
enough. So, how long have people been drinking whiskey, man? Sounds kind of like a floaty question, but
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I mean, so whiskey is actually it comes to us through Gaelic and originally through Latin. So the Latin concept for what we're consuming today was called aqua vitae, the water of life, and that got translated into a old Gaelic term called uscabe, and that's how we get whiskey.
But certainly nobody speaking Latin ever distilled whiskey, did they?
Absolutely, they did.
Yeah.
The people who started distillation, as far as we know, in the West, were monks,
Really?
Catholic monks, and they probably did so starting in Ireland at some point. When it comes to whiskey, now distillation was done by going back quite a long time, and there's even evidence that the Babylonians were doing distillation not of alcohol but of other things. So it's very possible that we've been drinking something like whiskey for well over 1,000 years now.
Really?
Yeah.
So in monasteries, you're saying they were distilling a drinkable, like grain.
They were distilling,
alcohol?
yeah, they were distilling drinkable alcohol,
Really?
and
Like 1,000 years ago.
more even.
Serious? Very cool.
Yeah. So
Now,
now,
where that beer was, at least
yeah. So what we
propagated in that manner, but I didn't know.
Now, the technical description of whiskey, which would be something which is a distillate of grains, which is then aged in wood barrels, they probably weren't drinking that.
It's probably a
At
very
least-
different product.
At
the
least
end
not
of the
on
day, right?
purpose, right? It would be very possible for them to leave this spirit in oak barrels and then consume it later on. That technically would be a whiskey.
So whiskey is only after it's distilled and then aged in wood for 3 years, right?
Yeah. So Canadian law states that in order to call something a whiskey, it has to be aged in oak barrels for at least 3 years. Whiskey is the most regulated spirit in the world. Depending on where the whiskey is distilled, there's different rules determining what can be called whiskey, what can be called a straight whiskey, what can be called the bourbon, what can be called the Scotch whiskey, and those they can get fairly complex. They can deal with things like alcohol weight and all these weird measures, but for in terms of a general definition, whiskey is any distillate of grains which has been aged in wood barrels. That's it for a baseline definition of what whiskey is.
For a period of time of any specific length, or
I would say that it would have to be for at least 2 years
I see.
before you could actually call something a proper whiskey. It takes a while for the wood and the distillate to interact.
Do you remember when we were at the distillery the other day and the guy had the stout spirit? It wasn't called a whiskey because
Right.
it wasn't aged appropriately?
Yes, so in Canada, like it has to be 3+ years. So you can distill something out of grain, and it won't be a whiskey until it reaches that 3-year mark.
I see.
So, but that spirit will become a whiskey as soon as it reaches 3 years old.
I see.
And then we'll have
if you've got it in a barrel.
stout whiskey. Yeah.
Very cool. Stout whiskey. That's nice.
Yeah.
That was an interesting one. I wish I bought a bottle of that. I was thinking about it.
I'm sure there'll be more to come.
Yeah. Cool.
Fuck, I never heard of that. That sounds sick.
Yeah, we went to this little distillery the other day. Yeah.
Nice.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yep.
Didn't even know there was such a thing. So
It was close by.
Yeah, we're
behind
featuring
Walmart.
Shit.
Yeah, we're featuring one of their whiskeys. It's Last Straw Distillery, and,
Yeah,
and
this
we're
place.
featuring
This one, okay.
And we're
I just
featuring
poured a
yeah.
little bit of this Last Straw.
Yeah, man.
This one I think smells better than the last one we just
It's
had,
corn.
but I haven't tried it yet.
Very cool. I had this yesterday.
So we'll be sampling one of their whiskeys as well during the tasting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Made
Wonderful.
with pride and bond. Pretty
Yes, sir.
badass.
Just down the road.
Good stuff in
Very
Ontario,
good, very good.
whether it's beer or whiskey.
That's
Fuck.
right. Yeah.
Yep. A lot of distilleries popping up in Ontario.
Yeah. Looks like. So that's our brief history of whiskey internationally, but like.
Ooh.
When it comes to it being consumed outside of monasteries, it's like a popular beverage, like when did that become the case? I know beer was like consumed widely because there was really no other option to hydrate,
Yeah.
But what about whiskey?
Whiskey was a similar process. In order to save a grain that would otherwise go bad, they first fermented it and then distilled it.
Really?
Which it's even more preservation, right?
Yeah.
You can leave a distillate in a bottle or a barrel
Forever,
almost
practically.
indefinitely.
Yeah.
Beer, not so much.
Beer not so much. Right? Beer will turn on you.
Yeah.
So, but in terms of widespread consumption of whiskey, I mean, we're in a new boom time. Around just after the recession, 2008, whiskey really started taking off again. And now globally, it's certainly the most sought-after spirit in the world. And you have bottles of whiskey going for well over $1 million.
Really?
These very old
$1 million.
bottles, rare bottles of whiskey, well over $1 million. So there's actually investment funds that buy bottles of whiskey and barrels of whiskey,
Really?
and because they consider it a stable product that will grow in value in the years to come.
That's intelligent.
Liquid gold.
It is. It is liquid gold. Its uses are
Tense,
it's been used on the battlefield to treat wounds. It is a store of wealth in terms of its ability to outlast most people.
Full of antioxidants as well, apparently.
Full of antioxidants.
Consumed in moderation, it's apparently incredibly beneficial to your health.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah. And depending on what it's bottled at, it can easily be mixed with water in order to treat water. So it's something which is not just simply a shot that you take to get little bent.
Slaughtered.
Yeah.
Honestly,
I mean,
like it's
that's
much
the case.
better to like we've been sipping this 1 ounce for half an hour now, and it's
At
very
least,
pleasurable. Yeah. I always
I've
tended
moved
away
on
from
to
hard
this-
alcohol
this
because
one.
I'm the kind of guy who drinks like,
Lots of volume.
compulsively.
You're more of a
Yeah.
like quantity over quality.
Yeah, but if you sip
you were
it, you can
anyway.
still drink
No.
constantly, but enjoy the taste.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's so much that you don't notice when it's just going back down your throat.
Yeah,
And that's the good thing
different
about-
sensation you're on after that. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's a great thing about whiskey. We're saying more locally how is it consumed, and really, especially lately, it's more for an appreciation of the spirit. It's definitely not bar rail vodka.
No.
That's
Yeah.
not what people are consuming it for.
yeah, exactly.
I feel like I shouldn't even sell
I
bar
wouldn't
rail
even
here.
be able
It
to.
just encourages drunkenness practically.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I mean,
It actually does.
different
Yeah, I guess
businesses
so.
and different bars have their clientele. But if I was opening a whiskey bar, it definitely wouldn't be a lot of
Yeah.
spirits that you usually see
you
at a
just
bar.
need some for like
Yeah.
cheap drinks.
So when did whiskey become commercialized? Like I read originally, even during Prohibition, it was permitted for people to import whiskey because it was a medicine or a tonic. People considered it, right?
I mean, in terms of commercial production of export whiskey in Canada, to my knowledge, the first people to actually export were the Molson family, which are known now for their beer.
Yeah.
And they were distilling and exporting whiskey in the early 1800s. So it's been in our culture for almost as long as the country's been around.
Sure.
In Scotland, a little bit longer. There was a lot of illegal distillation and illegal sale, but eventually the monarchy granted licenses for distillation, and then you had legitimate whiskey sales. So for the better part of 300 years, we've been commercially creating and selling whiskey
Very
in the
nice.
West. Yeah.
And has it improved over time? Like, would you say,
The safety of the product has definitely improved.
Yeah, no doubt. For distilled alcohol, probably is more concerns,
yeah,
right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, your heads and your tails.
Yeah,
right?
you're playing with fucking fire there.
Yeah, so,
literally and figuratively, eh?
Yeah, you know, less distilleries are exploding, so that also
that's
helps.
Nice. Less people going blind, probably.
Less people going blind.
Yeah.
So the quality of the product, in a sense, has never been better.
Craftsmanship wise, though, I guess I'm asking, like, do you think it's improved? Like,
so because of, like we said, because of the huge boom in desire for the product, a lot of around the world, and in Canada, we're actually fortunate because we are such a massive producer of grains, and our distilling culture is still relatively small. So I don't think that we'll be affected as much. But the Scotch whiskey industry, many people have said that the quality of regular production spirits has gone down. This has to do a lot with the fact that there's not a lot of good barrels out there to be had.
Really?
And a lot of people will tell you, oh, there's 3 ingredients in whiskey: water, yeast, and grain. That's absolutely untrue.
yeah.
Those are 3 of the probably least important ingredients in whiskey. The most important ingredient in whiskey is the barrel.
Yeah?
By far.
So how does that work? What the fuck does a barrel do?
So the barrel is the thing which creates your complexity of flavor in a whiskey. You can put pretty much any distillate in a barrel, and it will round it out.
That flavor.
So so it will take out the rough patches. It will smooth out the whiskey, and it will also pull caramels and flavors from the wood into the whiskey. This is another reason why the quality of the spirit has been declining, is because you simply cannot get these old barrels like the types they used to use. So they used to use sherry barrels that were holding sherry for decades. Not a lot of these barrels are around anymore.
I guess you got to throw them out eventually, right?
Yeah, like, was there a certain point where the barrel becomes unusable, let's say?
Barrels are often reused. On a lot of whiskeys, you'll see it's either first fill or refill barrels.
What's desirable? You want a refilled barrel, or you want a first use barrel?
It depends on the type of spirit that you're putting into it. If you have a very light, floral, delicate spirit, you probably don't want to bomb it with a first fill sherry barrel. It's just going to kill it. Yeah. Same thing with first fill bourbon. So in the United States, by law, you can only use a barrel once to age whiskey. So all of that whiskey which is produced in the United States, which is a huge producer of whiskey, those barrels are only used one time. Now, those barrels are then sold. They're sold to the wine industry, and they're sold to the rest of the whiskey industry across the world.
Beer, too, buy them now.
Yeah, we
beer.
They age them for beer. So you can do 2 things with that. You can just take that barrel and put a new spirit into it, or you can rechar it. You can burn the inside of the barrel again and make it like a new barrel. You can only rechar a barrel so many times, because every time you're doing that, you're thinning out. You're just thinning out the actual wood, and you're losing the ability of the barrel to hold the content.
Well,
So it could be 1 fill. A barrel could go bad after 10 fills. It really depends on the barrel.
Very cool.
And the coopers.
The time. You know how, I guess, any whiskey that sits longer is, better or whatever, right?
This is what a lot of people tell me.
Yeah, but is there like
is that the case?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So we were like at the place the other day. The guy was telling us about this exact thing. It's like saying, like, what did he say? I don't fucking.
So basically, there's a few different opinions on this. There's the one opinion that the older the whiskey, the better it is.
Okay.
This is a common opinion here. This is what most people think. So when you see a 20-year,
but, I mean, it's sort of like promoted that way, right? Like they, when you sell a more expensive whiskey that's been aged longer, they sort of shove it in your face, right? They'll say,
sure,
it's 18-year, right?
But if you spend 18 years on the inside of a sewer pipe,
well, this was my question. So I guess what I originally wanted to say was, is there too much time? Like, is there too long of a time that it could start to go south? Or
absolutely, just like any other consumable alcohol. If you keep a wine in a barrel for too long, it just gets too woody.
I guess.
If you keep a spirit in a barrel for too long, you can just drown out the spirit, and all you'll taste is like this weird sort of woody mass. Also, different types of spirit need different times in barrels.
Okay.
So my favorite whiskey is peated whiskey.
Right.
If you take peated whiskey and you leave it in a barrel for too long, it starts losing that smoky
flavor
character, and then it cannot be good for it. So different whiskeys also present better at different ages.
So in like a peat, how do you say it? Sorry.
Peated
whiskey.
Yeah.
What's like your ideal length of time, like the ones that you like?
Yeah, so Lagavulin 16-year-old tends to be the upper level of aging for like most
10,
peated
12.
whiskeys. Once you go past 16 years old, a lot of peated whiskeys start to lose a little bit of their character.
Okay.
Lafroig 10-year-old, Bowmore 10-year-old, Talisker 10-year-old. A lot of peated whiskeys have that 10-year-old mark on it as like a good spot to go.
Yeah.
However, that's Scotland. The weather in Scotland is different. The
fair.
grain in Scotland
there's
is
too
different.
many variables then,
There's a lot
right?
of
There's
variables.
just so
it really
much,
depends
yeah.
on where you are and what type of spirit you're putting into the barrel.
At the end of the day, though, I guess that's not a bad thing because just ultimately gives you more options. There's just all kinds out there, right? You're sure to find something you like.
Absolutely. When people tell me they don't like whiskey, I tell them, no, you just haven't found a whiskey you like.
Yeah. This one that I just poured, what is this? Last Straw Distillery?
So this is the product from Last Straw that we will be tasting in the
49%. What?
Yeah, it's 49% alcohol by volume.
Dude.
It's 100% straight corn whiskey.
The first sip I had was like intense. It was really, I wasn't expecting. It was really harsh, right? But now that it's been sitting for a little bit, it's been opening up. It's nice.
Yep.
I really like this. Lots of caramel.
Yeah, it is really sweet and caramel.
So we talked about adding ice. Now, what do you think about adding a drip of water to whiskey?
So this is a different process.
Different thing, right?
Dilution is a lot different than
ice?
reducing temperature.
Yeah.
Like, but even is it dilution to add a drip? Is that what you call it? Like I heard a drip even changes the whole thing somehow. It fucking opens.
It can. It depends on how sensitive the whiskey is. This is another question for very old whiskeys. They're very water sensitive.
Okay.
So if you start putting way too much water in an old whiskey, it's going to just drown it out. But certain whiskeys which are bottled straight out of the cask, and they have cask strengths of 60 odd %. The best thing to do in that situation would be to cut down that alcohol strength and allow your palate to better understand what's going on, because that much alcohol is just going to shock your palate.
Right.
But does it do something to the taste, though? Like, how you mentioned before, the cold temperature subdues the taste and you won't taste it. Like, does the water somehow accentuate the flavors or something like that, or change it?
There are chemical sort of interactions that happen when you do add water to the whiskey, but the most important thing that water does is reduce the alcohol content, and so that it doesn't shock your tongue.
I see. So perhaps that's desirable in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely. In a lot of whiskeys that come out cask strength, you definitely should not be drinking that at 60 odd % or 55% even. I think.
Yeah. In that case, you would say to
most whiskeys
dilute a bit.
Yeah. From my experience, and I've tried at this
Hundreds.
point, I probably even more, probably over 1,000 whiskeys. Anything over 55% alcohol, generally speaking, you want to add water, a little bit of water.
Anything over 55, you said?
Anything over 55% generally is just too much alcohol for the palate to handle, and it really
makes it impossible to enjoy.
This one's 49, and I can tell it's heavy. But like I said, it's been opening up, and my palate's sort of adjusting to it. It's nice, but on first sip,
and you can try different levels of dilution. Like the distilleries, often what they do is they take the spirit out of the barrel and then they start a sample of dilution cuts.
Oh, okay.
So this may have come out at 65, let's say.
Right.
And then they dropped it down to 60, and then they dropped it down to 55, and then they dropped it down to 50.
And mix it with spring water or something like that?
And they sort of stop where they find is appropriate, like not at a set.
Exactly. And they'll stop where they feel that they've reached that balance between the optimum level of taste and alcohol.
See, this one looks viscous, comparatively?
Yeah, it tastes
compared to the last one. See how it
caramelly
hangs off the glass?
I mean, both of the ones that we've tried, they're probably both around that 3-year-old mark. I don't think that they're much older than that.
And we know this guy was not colored, you're saying, right?
Yeah, so we know, again, every distillery, take note here, if your whiskey is not chill filtered and not colored, put it on your label. or else there's no way for us to know.
Do they say?
So they don't. They don't.
Oh, they don't.
So yeah, put non-chill filtered, put no added color.
But this guy, you spoke to him, you said, and he tested
Yeah. So this distillery, we spoke to them, and they don't do any of that stuff, which is good. Which
Very
means
nice.
you're going to get the maximum quality product
It's beautiful. Look at
for
it.
the price. It is. It's gorgeous. It's a clean sort of.
Salute, boys.
Yeah. Cheers, boys. It's a
Corn
clean sort of
whisk.
amber gold.
Yeah. Corn whiskey, is that like an American style typically? Where did that come from?
Believe it or not, corn is actually probably the predominant grain used even in Canadian whiskey. For something to be called a bourbon, however, it has to be a minimum of 51% corn. The rest of the grains can be whatever. But corn is definitely the most used grain in North America to make whiskey.
So is this a bourbon then?
No. So to be a bourbon, it has to be distilled, barreled, and bottled in the United States.
I see.
This is you may call this a sort of bourbon style.
Yeah.
But even then, most bourbons are not 100% corn.
I see.
100% corn is more like a moonshine.
So is this 100% corn?
This is a 100% corn spirit.
Wow.
It's still a whiskey. It's made out of grain.
Yeah.
But
Aged in barrels, but
aged in barrels.
very good. It's delicious.
Yeah.
I like this.
Yeah, it is nice.
We got the rye up there too. Shit.
Yeah. You guys, they pretty much everything these craft distilleries make in Ontario is actually pretty good. I haven't had any products that I'm just like, ooh, don't want to try that again.
No, eh?
It's good that you mentioned that because I'd like to know a little bit about what the whiskey culture is like in Ontario. Like we got hundreds of beers here. It's not even close to the total in Ontario. Like what's the whiskey like comparatively?
So there are a lot of distilleries in Ontario. The biggest, there's the big boys who have been here for a long time. Like you'd know Wiser's and Canadian Club. Both of those are distilled in Ontario by huge whiskey distillery. So distilling has been here a while. Now all these craft distilleries that are popping up, and by my measure, there's a couple dozen now. We have to remember that it takes 3 years at least to have a whiskey. So even if you have 50 distilleries, it takes them 3 years to lay down the product to actually get that whiskey out. So we do have several small batch distilleries, and there's going to be more and more every year. And I don't see the whiskey culture declining anytime soon in Ontario. If anything, it's just getting stronger.
Do we have any like whiskey bars?
There are a lot of whiskey bars. My favorite place to go when I first started out, it was actually a members bar called the Toronto Temperance Society. They probably have one of the nicest collections of whiskey anywhere in the city.
Members only. How does that work?
You'd have to ask them. Yeah, so contact them and you can get in on that. But there's many whiskey bars
Yeah, don't shoot the mic.
spread throughout the city. There's not that many whiskey bars outside of Toronto, and there is a reason for that. Generally, bars, to make a profit, they need to sell stuff at a pretty significant markup. And when you start getting a lot of these imported Scotch whiskeys that sell for retail at $200, $300 a bottle, a shot of that's going to be $35, $40. So it's something that
So it would make sense for them to focus on Ontario stuff anyway, right?
Yes and no. I mean,
If there was.
like you could easily create a bar that specializes in Ontario craft spirits. I don't know if there's enough whiskey being produced in Ontario that you could span the spectrum of whiskey.
Right.
You could definitely do across Canada.
Yeah. Okay.
There's different distilleries across Canada doing different styles.
Yeah.
And if you got spirits from pretty much every distillery across Canada, you'd
cover them,
you'd have quite the wall of whiskey by the time you're done. But there's a lot of Canadian distilleries that sell products that are in that $200
That are high end as
range.
well. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Very cool.
So we're there. We're Canadian whiskey has been a competitive. It's been competitive in the whiskey world since it started, and because we have a traditional style, but we do make all types of whiskey. So
I feel like it's a general trend in society to move. You know, if you're going to have to drink it all, figure you're not going to drink something cheap or what you could replicate in your own living room. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
that's
I feel
the
like
hope.
people are becoming more amicable to paying $40, let's say, for a shot of, like I sell a beer for $25. You know,
Yeah.
why not a shot of whiskey for $40? I it's
again, a lot of people are going to want that taste experience, and if as a bar you can secure product which is hard to find or in small batches, people do seek that out. That's absolutely the case.
From a drinker's perspective, you can go out and have 4 terrible drinks, or you can have 1 good one for the same price. Like, it's easy to see which would you would go. Like, personally,
depends what your end goal is, though, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe when I was a teenager, my end goal was different.
Yeah.
But now
it definitely is not the same thing, right?
Yeah, whiskey is definitely, the type of spirit that does not lend itself well to overindulgence.
Yeah, I could see that.
You'll probably go broke if you do that too often.
Vomit quickly.
It's just, at the end of the day, it's just not for that. Right?
No. On top of that, though, like if you're running an establishment,
although I have to. Sorry, I was going to say, I apologize because I am overindulging right now.
No,
that's the name. That's the name of the show, no?
But yeah, it is the theme of the show.
What's your influence level, Alex?
Honestly, I'm already at like an 8.
I'm proud of you, man.
Yeah. Drinking, slanging beers down takes a little while longer than having 3 glasses of whiskey.
49% alcohol whiskey.
This is the biggest one I poured, and it was.
You got to figure also that if you're running an establishment and you're selling everything that you stock at the same markup, you could sell, like, again, 4 drinks to those people and make the same things if you're selling one guy 1 drink.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, it's not like you're making less money off of that more expensive item. So, like, I think it works out better for everybody.
And there is whiskey more than any other spirit has a. There's a difference between a consumer and a customer. So a customer is just somebody that walks in your door and you see every single day, or like that type of person every single day. A consumer is somebody who sort of gets knowledge about what they're doing, and a lot of distilleries lately have been focusing on those consumers, those people that
informed consumer rather than just a fucking
it's not just somebody that walks in and starts
the casual.
So whiskey definitely lends itself to that type of just that type of clientele. There's people that follow distilleries and they know the product and they know the thing which is good versus bad. And
is there gatekeeping of whiskey?
No.
Are there gatekeepers in whiskey tasting? I mean,
at the end of the day, though, like, it's a different thing to say, just because there are people that follow it. I think that precipitates high quality, but at the same time, that gives people who want something new an opportunity to try something that's actually quality, right? Like, why? Because there are experts, does that make it inaccessible to you? What stops you from going and trying it too, right? Like, that just means there's something better for you when your time comes, like.
Yeah. It's actually a benefit for the industry because
it's benefit for everybody. It encourages a higher quality product, right?
Absolutely.
And if you still like shit, who cares? You like it. You like what you like, right?
Yeah. What, you want me to give you a fucking slap on the ass? Like,
what the hell?
But when those discerning customers, when they feel like they're getting burned by distillery, they will kick it to the curb, and it's happened many times.
Yeah.
And distilleries know this, because you can have a cult-like following, but if those cult members turn on you, you're in trouble. So it's definitely that type of industry.
Beer, whiskey, and video games.
Yeah.
What's better?
Any other interesting anecdotes about whiskey you could tell us?
Well, there's you could probably go on, and books have been written, and entire university programs have been focused around this spirit. So it's really just if it's something that you're interested in, go out to tastings, start trying product, and you'll know right away if it's a world that you want to get yourself into. Similar to video games, right? You can dive in, you can just dip your toe in, but there's definitely something out there for everybody.
It's enough to keep you busy for sure.
For sure.
Very cool, man.
I'd say comparatively, I've only dipped a toe into whiskey compared to like video games, and because of my craft beer.
Yeah.
I've tried I feel like a proxy beer, Ontario craft beer specialist just through him. Like, I go to the LCBO and I see the ones. I'm like, yeah, this one's good. This one's all right. This one's shit. Oh, they don't even have this bad. They suck. Like, I'm some kind of like douchebag now.
Yeah, me too. I like
That's usually how I feel when I walk.
I wouldn't even walk into the beer store because God knows what they have.
Nothing good. It is nice once in a while though to. Sometimes I see at the LCBO, like, from the bigger breweries, like Mill Street, some random shit, like a cool Cole Stout.
Oh, yeah. something like
Pick that up,
just
yeah.
one-off,
Otherwise,
yeah.
I wouldn't see those, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
the barley wine that Mill Street made for a few years. I don't know if they still make it. I would follow that every year. It's a quality product.
They make good cider too. Actually, they're at they own Brickworks. Brickworks is good cider. Well, you guys want to take a few minute break?
Let's do it. Sham some fucking cornets down.